Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what time zone you're in. I think we have several here today. Welcome to today's session on maximizing ROI from your ERP data. I'm Daniel Doloff, EVP of Sales at Sparkflow, and joining me is John Perry, our EVP of Data Intelligence.
So thanks, Danielle. It's great to be with you. In the names and we don't have faces on here too much, but I know in the crowd we've got several existing Sparkflow customers and some people that we've talked to that are prospectively interested in Sparkflow, and some of the people that are in the crowd today we're meeting you for the first time. So thank you for joining us. We're going to try to make this very practical and informative, and we're trying to stay focused on the questions and challenges that manufacturers like you are having every day, and helping you find solutions for those.
Exactly. So to that point, today is about unlocking the value that's already in your ERP. Every transaction, every job, every material movement, the data's there. The question is whether you're getting the insights you deserve from it or whether your team is spending weekends pulling spreadsheets for one-day status meetings. So we'll walk you through how Sparkflow solves that and back it up with a live demonstration, including some AI-based natural language querying. All right, so let's get into the specific pain points. There we go. Basically, we see three major patterns across manufacturers. The first one, you see multi-site reporting complexity. So if you're running multiple plants or divisions, you know this. You're often limited to viewing one site at a time at SiteLine. Consolidated views of customers, vendors, inventory across the enterprise just isn't available. The next one is our favorite. We know we love Excel, but how many hours do we spend a week extracting data from SiteLine, cleaning it up, building pivot tables, trying to reconcile the numbers, and they just never match. And by the time you've done all that, the data is stale and you've forgotten your questions. The last one is AI. So unlocking AI for companies can be game changing, but there are real barriers. Data quality, accessibility gaps make it hard to get useful AI output. And data is a key foundational element in leveraging AI tools. So this is just what we're seeing. We see other ones, but these are the most common typical reporting challenges we see.
Yeah, and if you're trying to do an AI pilot, it doesn't scale well if you don't have good quality data. And so really what we've seen is this 80-20 rule. Whenever we've done these historically, before we had tools like Sparkflow, and people doing this for years and years and years, that 80% of the effort goes into that data collection and consolidation, getting the data right for the analysis. So only 20% of the time is really used for the analysis and the presentation layer. So if you think about that, that's a completely backward ratio. So if you have an analyst on your team who's spending 20 hours a month on reporting, 16 of those hours are probably spent just pulling in and reconciling the data, and only 4 hours of that, as Danielle mentioned, are spent actually acting on that data through analysis. And so we invert that equation. We automate the 80%, the extraction, the cleansing, the transformation, and the governance, which is really important for AI, so that your team can focus on the part that is most important, that really drives business value from your data. So that is really sort of the key differentiator from what we do in Sparkflow.
How do you make sure the data foundation is trustworthy? So this is the governance question.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's bureaucracy, and we don't need any more bureaucracy, but it's very practical. It means, how can we trust that our data is good enough and clean enough to make decisions from it? So real data governance operates on three levels, and all three of these have to work together. The strategy, the control, and the execution. The strategy is the why. Do we have clear policies, different owners of the data, and standards? So what does the revenue actually mean in your business? We've been in many situations where revenue means this to one group, but it means something to a different group completely differently. So we have to establish these definitions and agree upon them from the executive level down. And then control and definition. This is the what, the validation rules, the auditing mechanism to make sure that data stays clean, not just one time, but through all time. And then the execution part of it is the how. This is the technical infrastructure. That's the APIs, the pipelines, the automation, the transformation logic, the semantic models. This is sort of the machinery of the governance that makes this real rather than theoretical. Most organizations are actually pretty good at the strategy layer. We find that that's not usually the challenge, but where things really tend to fall apart is down at that execution layer, that technical work that enforces the policies in the data pipeline. And that's the gap that we close with Sparkflow. So we take your governance policies, we implement them in the code that is used to transform the data, and it's enforced every time the data comes through, at every refresh, not just when someone remembers to go and check to make sure that the business rules are still being applied.
Yeah, it's so important to have good data governance, but it's also important that everyone sees the same data. So we talk about one version of the truth, like our favorite phrase. And so what we're just trying to show here is that the same governed data foundation serves every level of your organization. So you have the foundation, workers need the transactional details. Middle managers need management reporting. Senior managers, decision support analysis, scenario comparisons, explanations, stuff like that. And executives, time crunches 3 or 4 numbers that tell them whether the business on track. And so that's the power of Sparkflow, one data foundation, governed consistently, delivers the right view to every level. Same source, same business rules, no reconciliation. So when anyone in your organization asks, what's our margin on this product line, everyone gets the same answer. No more spending time in meetings or emails debating what is the right margin number. You spend time finding ways to optimize it. So that's what we mean by one version of the truth.
Yeah, and this architecture is really only possible with the right governance model that really drives the whole thing, and that's where Sparkflow handles this. I'm going to show you a little bit just about our process, and if you've seen one of our presentations, this is probably a slide that you're familiar with, so I won't go into it in too much labor, but I know that there are people that don't know what Sparkflow is, so we've got to cover it in a sort of a quick walkthrough. We've got to go get that data from wherever it exists. So that's what's here. So we're going to connect to where your data lives. If you're on Sightline, you're on Sightline and other ERPs, you're in the cloud, you have CRM, you have Excel, you have external APIs from third-party data services. That's what we do is we bring that in sort of its raw form. I'll use some terms today, bronze, silver, and gold. And this is sort of that bronze. It's that data as it exists. The real critical design principle here is that we do this incrementally whenever possible. So we're going to detect the net change, net add of that data, and we're not going to go get the full database every time we bring this data in. So we can get in and out of systems very quickly. And that's what we're pulling into that bronze layer. So think of that bronze layer as a digital snapshot of your existing system in its current state. We don't modify it at this point. The records just land here first where we can use them. So this is a foundation that everything else depends on. If the data doesn't get in and cleanly and reliably, nothing downstream will work for us. So all of this is sort of pre-built within Sparkflow. We've built it very consistently with the CSI data structure. So you're not going to be building your data integrations from scratch. So once we get that raw data in, then we're going to go through this transformation layer. This is sometimes called the silver layer. It's where the data has been curated and the business rules applied to it, and we're standardizing it. So you may have specific business rules that another one of your peers in this webinar doesn't have. So we're going to use your business rules. We'll validate the data quality. There's going to be inconsistencies perhaps between sites or systems. Let's fix those in the calculations and the ingestion of that data, and then transform those so that those data rules are applied consistently. If there's bad records, we can flag those and quarantine those. We're not going to drop them, but we're not going to pass them through so that you're going to have full visibility into that bad data as well. And then last is the gold layer that's in our data warehouse itself. The gold layer is the pristine, ready to use data models. This is where the analytics are ready, and this is the layer that we use for our AI models as well. So this is really the heart of Sparkflow. This slide here is what Sparkflow does and does well. So we have some pre-configured models. We've talked about these if you've seen our demos before. Many of you are using many of those, and it's really a jump start to get the world running for you with Sparkflow.
And it's John, is this the point, the magic point where we do achieve that single version of the truth
Yes.
that everyone at every level asks for, and everyone is working from the same governed foundation.
Absolutely. This is where everyone starts to sing from the same song sheet. This is convergence of all parts of the organization where they can agree on the data. So let's look at the last part. This is the presentation layer. This is really just using tools like Power BI or reporting services or Excel, and to get at that data in its full scope to be able to report that data consistently. The interactive dashboards and capabilities of Power BI gives your operation teams, your analysts, that kind of ability to really see consistent measurements of how the business is running. For Excel is possible for people who love to live in spreadsheets, and in manufacturing and in accounting. That's a lot of people. So connecting Excel to the semantic model gives you the full visibility of that data with security applied to it, so that people are only allowed to get into what they're allowed to get in. It really uses that governed model and really gets us away from that VLOOKUP hell that we have all gone through. So if your plant managers want to use something on a mobile device to keep track of what's going on the shop floor, that's great. If you want to use a phone or a tablet, Power BI supports that. Wherever you are in the facility, you don't need to be at your desk. And now, when we've got these governed models, that natural language query can help us with our AI tools and our AI agents. And we're going to get to that demo pretty shortly, but this gives us the ability to ask business questions in plain English and ask questions of that governed data. So this is the full picture. And so you're looking at the complete data store on your data flow, I'm sorry. And on the left, you see your source systems. It moves through, whether those are from Sightline or any other ERP, your external data feeds, and we get everything all together in one governed model. But I want to highlight an underlying platform questions, because this is critical for your long-term strategy. We use analysis services, and that's still a great proven platform, but Microsoft has made it clear that Microsoft Fabric is going to be their analytics platform going forward. That's where they're investing money. And so Fabric is our destination as we move through things. But we're architected so we can support both. Our existing customers are using analysis services. You can start there. You can migrate to Fabric when you're ready. If you're deploying fresh, we're going to have the ability to do everything within Fabric. So this is the architecture we've designed, means that you're not locked in. You can choose the platform that works right for you, that fits your Microsoft licensing and fits your strategic direction, because we're going to be able to work on both. So now we're getting to the part that changes the game. This is the AI-enabled version of the Sparkflow architecture. Everything we've shown you, everything we've built into the pipeline, the bronze, the silver, the gold, the semantic models, the governance, now becomes this foundation for AI. And there's two modes of interaction that we can do with this AI, the AI tools. Up at the top, Copilot, NLQ, natural language query, not to use all the acronyms in the world, allows us to query within the Power BI tenant, the Power BI service, the data that exists in these models, these semantic models. And I'll show you that in just a minute. If you were at the Sun conference a few weeks ago, that's a demonstration that we did of what's capable there. As we've gotten back from this and we weren't really ready for that, we've got a couple of other new options, including one for Copilot, and that's using the Model Context Protocol, or MCP server. It's really sort of a broker, a gateway of getting into the data from one of the other AI tools, natural language query tools, or LLMs. Sorry to keep using acronyms, but that's the alphabet soup that we're in today. So whether that's Claude, ChatGPT, or Copilot, we can connect directly to these semantic models. The agent doesn't just answer data questions, but it can monitor operations, it can surface anomalies, it can correlate patterns across data sets, and it can trigger alerts. It's pretty remarkable, and I want to get to show you that in just a second. So this allows us to use whatever your AI agent or your AI client of choice to connect to the platform and connect to that gold layer data. And the AI gets the full context of your business, not just raw tables, but this governed, meaningful data that we use for reporting. All right. Yeah, same data foundation. That's going to be the key here. Data quality and data governance are what makes AI work and makes it trustworthy. And that's what I'm going to show you in the demo in just 1 minute. We'll come back to that in just a second. So what I've done here is that I'm showing you three different elements of this. One is Power BI it's the Copilot within Power BI. And then I'm going to use my accounts receivable model that we have here. This version of it is ChatGPT using an MCP server, and this is Claude using an MCP server. So I've connected to these right before our meeting. Hopefully they'll have stayed connected during our time away. But I'm going to ask the same questions of this. One of the people that's on the call today gave us this challenge a few weeks ago as they were evaluating Sparkflow. And he said, make it do these 20 things, ask these 20 prompts about your accounts receivable data. And it was a great challenge for us, and it really caused us to think through things a little bit differently. So I'm going to start in Copilot here in my accounts receivable model, and I'm going to put the prompts that were provided to us. And it says, review the AR aging, provide an executive summary, including total AR, current percent past due, 60 and 90-day exposure, top delinquent customers, and key risks. So it's a pretty comprehensive ask of it. And it also asks for that executive summary. And then we're going to ask the same question through ChatGPT. And then we're going to ask the same question here. I'm going to send this one off first because I want to see if it stayed connected. And I've already signed in, but it's wanting me to do it again. So we'll switch to this while that wakes up. I'll send off Copilot to do its thing and the fabric capacity, and I'll send off Claude to do its thing. So I thought this might be really interesting to see sort of a side-by-side comparison of the same data, 3 different AI tools, and see how they perform, both in terms of speed. We've got an F8 capacity here, which is not tiny, but it's not massive. You can go up to, depending on how much money you want to spend with Microsoft, you can go up to, I think, 2056 or something like that, something crazy. This probably
And
needs me
I
to do
just
this.
want to say, and I think the point, the risk of causing confusion by showing these models, but the point is we're playing with all these models because they are constantly changing. And what was really strong 4 weeks ago or last week is now less strong than another model. And we're seeing other capabilities, and it seems to be changing quite fast on us. And we're trying to show here that we have the flexibility to use your preferred models. Also, we do understand that some companies only allow certain LLMs, they've built a preferred one or, just have some restrictions. So there's flexibility here. And if you can choose what you want, you can choose the one that fits you best, that you work with, that you're familiar with, that you like, and that knows you too. So it is 3 different models, but we wanted to show the flexibility and the capability here.
Yeah, so this again is Claude on the left, and it's come back with its answer to this, and it gives me quite a bit of diagnosis of this and gives me some other sort of follow-on prompts that we might have. And this is the ChatGPT version of things, and has its pretty good discussion there. This asked me another question, so I answered it while we were answering. Yeah, I know. I want to see it. So Copilot gave me a pretty data-centric answer here. Technically, it's using a different data set in this, but we won't look at the numbers specifically, but just sort of the ability to analyze this. So that's question 1. So let's ask it to do a couple of other things here. So I'm going to ask Claude first to use also our sales model, combine open orders by customer, and add this to the AR aging so we can see our total exposure with open customers. I'll ask that of ChatGPT as well, and I'm going to ask Power BI. And we'll see a limitation here right off the bat is I can only choose one model and not multiple models. So that's only going to look at one model at a time today.
The whole Claude and OpenAI AI stuff he's showing you is something we figured out a couple weeks ago. So
Yep.
that tells
Yep.
you, a lot of this is changing, and it's exciting. It's exciting because, again, you'll see what we liked about this and we're impressed is there's a bit of analysis. It's almost as if you're talking to a coworker or your business analyst and they're saying, okay, here's the data, but here's my takeaway. Here's some things that I want to call out. And I think that is powerful and shortcuts people to get to the answer they're really trying to get to in theory.
Yeah, and I think it's I'm going to steal a little thunder from the later part of my presentation. And what we found is that Copilot does a pretty darn good job of analyzing data that exists in the model. I'm asking it more complex questions because those are the types of questions I was provided. If it can read the data, write a query, generate that, it does a nice job of it. What the other models, the ChatGPT and the Claude versions of things, they do a better job of doing this analysis. And then Claude, you can see the complexity and the graphing and the visualization of that data tends to be much more comprehensive. So I'll ask another question here. I think we might abandon Copilot for a minute, but we'll give it a shot.
Give it another chance.
Yeah, and let's tell it this. And this is asking to give me an estimate of cash received in the next 4 weeks based on conservative estimates across aging buckets. So ChatGPT tends to be a little bit faster. This is thinking a little bit more deeply, and you have some other options within Claude to do more deep analysis. But I like that it gives you, here's what I expect. Here's the percentage that I'm going to do, because I asked for a conservative assumption. I can't just assume that everything is coming in. 1 to 30 days, we'll get that 70% of it. We'll get 50% in 10. And I could tweak these if I wanted to. It gave me a little interesting, I'm not sure what language that is, but you see that from time to time as it hallucinates what language I'm speaking. And then it gives me the sort of the effort and what my total expected value would be. And let's look at what Claude is generating here. And it gave me different percentages, which is a little bit interesting, but those could be tweaked if you want. And it gives me some nice visualizations and graphing of that data to give me sort of a week by week. It took it to the next level. Said, this one asked, do you want me to do a weekly forecast? Claude just said, I'm doing a weekly forecast for you. So, and I'm going to ask it something that's not even in the model. Well, let's see what its final results were. Nice visual graphic of week over week. So let's calculate days sales outstanding. And I haven't given it a definition of what days sales outstanding is. And let's see what Copilot did. It said, I need more data, but we'll give you another chance here, Copilot. And I don't mean to demean Microsoft's tool. We're a Microsoft partner, but I think it's just good to go into this with your eyes wide open. My point of view is, from my vast experience with Microsoft products, is that they are sometimes slow to market and they catch up. Power BI was an excellent example of that. It was a terrible product 7, 8 years ago, and it evolved to the point where it's one, if not the primary tool in use by customers across North America. So it's given me some other things that I'm not even sure what answers that was given me, because that's not what I asked it. I didn't push my go button. We gave Power BI a fresh head start on there, and that's what it came up with. Even with the head start, I don't like its answer. So this is synthetic data, so I'm not surprised that my day sales outstanding are in these amounts, but it does give me the information that I need. And I like what Claude does here, and it tells me what my thinking process is that I'm using here. Give it one more prompt here. Once it gets done, since ChatGPT finished its answer, I want to analyze across my whole AR. I want to see which collector or credit manager is involved there, and let's see what their workload looks like. So since you finished, we'll let you go, and from here we'll let you go. And it's still thinking.
As it's doing that, just a reminder, you can pop questions in the Q&A and we'll look at them, so you don't have to write them down and try to remember them at the end. You can do that at any time. If we happen to be able to figure it out and catch it, we'll answer it in the moment, but set your expectations. We will address those at the end, and we've left time for Q&A.
I think that some of the things are interesting in terms of its ability to interpret my wording. We don't have a collector, as was asked in the prompt, but we have the credit manager, which it has found that. We do have to, ChatGPT requires you to confirm every time that you're doing that. Once we've set up the MCP server and connected to it, it gets going. But I will say that ChatGPT is faster in terms of response. I like the responses that it gives me here, and then the actions. So Alicia has many more, a lot higher volume of AR, and so she might be overworked. Everybody seems to be doing well there. She has a big portfolio, but she's on average the same as the rest of the team, and so it's still building the scoreboards here. So depth of analysis stronger here, speed of analysis and reasonable responses here. Here, you're going to be more focused on the simpler queries about the data, not necessarily the analysis of the data. So let's look at what Claude has returned. And this is a pretty comprehensive look at the world here. Nice visuals, each person laid out, and what their portfolio looks like, and nice cards, sort of their
Yeah, that's
volumes.
presentation ready. You could
Yeah.
bring that to a meeting. And
Yep, absolutely. But I think the analysis gives you a great narrative of sort of actions to take there. So I'm going to flip back to the presentation just for a moment and sort of take us to the next step here. Let's flip that here. So we thought it might be helpful, because you might be saying, okay, I've used one of these tools one time and done some things and rewritten an email, but let's just talk a little bit about what the AI is doing in this context, because I think when most people hear AI, they're thinking about something out of science fiction. So what we're talking about is a much more practical view of the world here. In the context of business analytics, it comes down to these three things: pattern recognition, natural language understanding, and intelligent automation. The pattern recognition, this is where AI looks at that historical data and it gathers all those correlations that your human brain might miss. So, if we asked it for something like production attainment, and it might look through that data and say, Work Center 340 is falling behind schedule. Um, and it's going to notice that pattern that Work Center 340 is behind schedule, and then it might take it a step deeper and ask, okay, why is 340 behind schedule? And then it would look through what the material availability is for that job and that item. And I know we've been talking about AR, but thinking about it in a manufacturing scale. So it's not really magic about what it's doing. It's just volume and statistical analysis of what the AI is doing. And so when we ask it a natural language question, it's gonna translate that into a query against that data that sits in the database. So where you might write DAX formulas for a Power BI report, this is writing a DAX expression against that database, and then it's going to go and return the answer to you. So finding these answers are something that your analyst could probably find, but it might take them hours of digging just to go through all of the job history and the reports and the pivot tables to go through and do this. And it just does this in seconds. And it can do it continuously. And that's where that last piece of the story comes, is this intelligent automation. So not just being able to ask a single question, but it takes us to the next layer of ability, and that's agentic workflows that go and answer questions that you may not have even asked yet, but you've given it parameters about which to ask. So let's go back into sort of the natural language query. Show me the jobs behind schedule. It interprets that. It looks at actual versus plan, and it writes that DAX query, and it brings the results back like we saw with the Claude, either in a chart or a table, or we're giving you a verbal answer. As a key thing to note about this, it's right there at the bottom, is the way that this is and can be set up in this demo is that the data never leaves your environment. So it's the data that exists in your analytic models, which are on-prem. Those MCP servers are querying through, returning that. And I'll talk about some specific caveats here at the end about the different tools that are in use here, but this can be done so that it never really leaves your environment. It's only done for interpretation and then is discarded if the AI tools are set up correctly. So this is your proprietary manufacturing data. We're using these pre-trained language models, and the AI isn't learning from your transactions for broader use. It is for your business use, but not anyone else's. So that's a key security point here. So, and then the next thing is the agentic alerting. We'd hope to have some demonstration of this, and we're going to put out some videos when we have it fully baked. But I wanted to talk about what this looks like, because you've seen the capabilities of the AI tools and what they can do in running this, but there's some differences between how most manufacturers are doing alerting today versus what the AI agents can make possible. So the operational value is we get too many alerts for too many things today, and we start to ignore them. So if you have an alert set up for things, maybe in Sightline or something else, you've set it to a specific threshold, maybe an inventory alert that says, this is a critical material. Let me know when it goes below 100 units. So you decide that fixed threshold, and the SQL query can go and do that and say, we're at 99 units. Let Danielle know that we're under stock because you had that 100 unit threshold. But that's a fixed threshold. But the problem is that threshold might have been right 6 months ago when you set it up, but now your consumption pattern has changed. You just won a big contract, and now you're going through 150 units of 60. And so now 100 units is not a good answer. It's not a good threshold to hit. Or maybe demand dropped, and now you're getting all these nuisance alerts every week because you're overstocked. So the truth is that in most companies, the rules just sit there and get more and more out of date until people start ignoring them altogether, like I tend to. But think about that with an AI agent that works with the volume of data, and instead of alert me at 100 units, the agent looks at this historical consumption pattern. It learns what the new normal is, and it knows that for a particular material that you might have been using 60 or 75 units a day, or it sees a seasonal pattern where usage spikes in Q3, it understands the baseline and adjusts to that. So rather than being being 100 unit threshold, doing this dynamically. And if you're starting to use it 100 units a day, then 150, you might have 150 on hand, and the agent flags it because you didn't cross the 100 unit threshold, but you had a new pattern, and that's the deviation that mattered. So we're trying to look at the trends, not just the snapshot, and adapt. The AI models and the alerting will adapt so that it may stay at a higher level for a few weeks and then sees the trend line and says, no, the new normal is 120 units per day, and it adjusts its expectations and notifies you that there's potential for stock outs or different information like that. It's just one example. So do you have any other example, Danielle?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking that, you know, if you look at the sales side, again, all of this is instead of being reactive, you're proactive. So if you've got tell me customer 68 past due, that might be useful, but you already have a collections issue by the time you get the alert. And it's almost as if you're looking at one metric and doing the alert on one metric versus, a manager or an individual look across many metrics to make a decision. I'm in the sales side. And if I'm looking at just a customer past due, I look at other metrics when I'm trying to decide the action to take. It's not just an isolated alert. So that's the idea here too, is it's looking like we would look amongst other metrics. And again, changing and learning the patterns on what's important and what's the new norm and alerting you. So you're not getting false negatives or false positives.
Yeah,
If you will.
yeah. And in your example, there might be a customer normally, you know, day after day, week after week, pays in 15 days, but now you see their open AR drifting out into 30 to 40 days. So it might not be past due yet. They might not have hit that threshold, but you
Mhm.
can see that there's a shifting pattern. Maybe they're having cash flow problems. Maybe there's somebody to be on alert. Maybe we need to lower their credit limit because that's happening. Or maybe we've got a dispute that hasn't been recorded. It becomes the agent will spot these trends before we can even see that they're about to happen. We looked at the three different models here. I wanted to give you sort of a comparison side by side, the consumer reports, I guess, of these three options. Microsoft Copilot, again, we're a Microsoft Gold partner. We love Microsoft. We can only say good things about them, but we
Mhm.
do call them out when we see some shortcomings in them. What's great about it is we can have native integration. We're all Microsoft shops. Most likely, you're using SQL Server and your Excel and all the Office tools and such. And this has a very native integration within Power BI. Very limited in what we have to do to set this up to be able to push this data into Fabric and then to use that. And then if we have a Fabric capacity there, Copilot just becomes available to you. Even at the lowest tier, Copilot is there. As we saw, the ability to have reasoning and discussion of that is pretty limited. Like I said, it's sort of good for the day in, day out data queries of the data that's in there. You might want to use this instead of going in the report and slicing and filtering and shifting time and that sort of thing, but ask it that question about the data. So very basic queries that it does, and it sort of puts you into the Microsoft sphere completely. ChatGPT, I think, is a contender for sure. And if your company is using that, it's a pretty easy tool to use. It does a good job at code generation. It's something that is the familiar interface, and we saw it had pretty strong reasoning capabilities as we looked at that. So one of the limitations and the challenges here, and I said I would mention, is the default setting for ChatGPT is not zero data retention. So this requires special contracts with ChatGPT to require zero data retention. And then it does require things like this where we're integrating with it, and it doesn't have that natural semantic layer that Microsoft would have. And then Claude that we saw was sort of taking longer, but it also had much more robust analysis, visualizations, that sort of thing. It does the best job today of reasoning. Again, all these will evolve. They've probably evolved since we've started this meeting today. And we have the option of zero data retention and keeping our data secure. So it only would live in your analysis server or in Fabric, and we can do this and customize it to your domain. This is the platform. The limitation that we've had is where we've created that platform layer with Sparkflow.
So if you could kind of, John, summarize your recommendation. You did a good kind of description of each pluses
Yeah,
and minuses, but kind of tell us, where your head's at.
yeah. For most of our Sightline and CSI customers today, I'd say start with Copilot. You're in the Microsoft ecosphere. It's pretty zero friction in terms of getting there. Get started there and use the data interrogation features of Copilot. I think that is a great starting point. It takes what we're doing today and looking at reports and Excel spreadsheets and takes it to a faster, more direct way of getting it without having to do even taking more of that analysis piece off of it and getting to the answer most quickly. So I think that is the the great starting point. But if you want to go to more of the analytical reasoning, the enterprise grade data security, I would push toward Claude just because I think that's where we're seeing the most value and what we see right now. And we have one last slide here before we get to Q&A, but I wanted to show you where we are today. And this is sort of table stakes here, being able to get your data out into sort of a raw Excel format. Yeah, we can do that. We use Power BI to dump that data out. We have our Power BI reports. We have our standard dashboards. We have the reports. We have all the capabilities there of the Power BI reports, which I'm going to have an editorial comment. I don't think reporting goes away. I think there is still a high purpose and value to reporting something that's consistent every day that we go look at and we see our alerts. I mean, not our alerts, but we see our thresholding of, where are we versus budget? How are we doing year to date, et cetera. I think those remain a native part of our analytical stack in our companies. This was one of the features of Power BI, which was sort of an AI light. Don't get too married to this. This is a feature that will go away at the end of 2026, but it's there today and it does some good capabilities there. It's all being moved into the Copilot feature. So what we've seen today is sort of we're ready to launch and ready to pilot with existing customers, because I know we have a lot of existing customers on there, and also part of the feature set that will be part of the Sparkflow software package that when you become a customer. And so I think it's the big part of this slide is the future. This is where I think the Microsoft Fabric side of the world is going to be really helpful to us, because it's a full platform that allows us to have all of this data in one place for analysis, but it also gives us a future that allows us to take advantage of data science in the AI Foundry tools. And this is where I think that Microsoft is ahead of the game in the rest of the world. Natural language query, I feel like they're a little bit behind the others and the analysis that it does, but this is a place where they've really invested in the Fabric ecosphere. And then in the future to have predictive modeling that gives the ability to do more forecasts, to detect anomalies, to feed in machine data that tells you, hey, we're headed toward a failure in this machine, and it really gives you sort of a full suite of things. We're moving our sort of whole infrastructure off of server-based and into Microsoft Fabric. Existing customers can still use SQL Server, as well as customers who choose to use that because of perhaps some government or regulatory requirements. But to have a fully integrated serverless Microsoft Fabric version is something that we expect to have out in the third quarter of this year.
Okay. I think that's a wrap just to close up. And, we talked about one version of the truth, wrangling your data so that you can get reporting. We talked about the governance around it, and we talked about the leveraging. Once you've got that data wrangled, the ability to leverage AI to do some of these extended queries. And I will just underline what John said. I think the reporting stays in place even if you're doing natural language querying, because the reporting is sometimes where those questions come from. So what we have here is a survey. It's a 6-question survey just about your data. Should take just a couple minutes to maybe 45 seconds to fill out. And you entered for a chance to win a pair of Meta glasses. So go ahead and do that. The QR screens on the QR codes on the screen there. Also, you can see, like John said at the beginning, some of you we know, some of you we've been emailing. So these email addresses you may already have, but just putting up there, feel free to email any one of us or all of us if you have any further questions. If you want to, kind of personalized demo, anything like that, we are here and happy to help.
And whoever wins the Meta glasses, you need to be able to do natural language query on it and just be sitting in a meeting and then come up with the answer to whatever the CEO asks.
Looks so cool. It's so cool. All right. right. I think that brings us to a wrap again. We'll email this QR code out too if you don't have a chance
Uh,
right now to bring up your smartphone to grab it. And thanks again for joining us. Good afternoon.